Welcome, guys. Welcome, folks, this evening. Welcome to the YWCA National Capital Area. My name is Sarah Graham, and I'm the Communications and Advocacy Manager here at YWCA. We really appreciate you guys for joining us today for this courageous conversation. Now what? A post-election conversation. I think we can all say the 2020 election has been a ride. Even faced with a global pandemic, Americans voted in record numbers, some of the highest national turnout since the 1900s. And so we're here at the Y say, so now what? Tonight, that's what we're going to discuss, what you can do and what your community can do next. Specifically what you can do to support on the ground organizations and the doers of good as we kind of navigate this new normal. Just some housekeeping and run of show reminders. This conversation is going to run about an hour or so. We'll have 35 to 45 minutes of panel discussion and then Q&A at the end where you, the audience, can ask questions. If you have questions along the way, be sure to share them in the chat. Also, a few reminders. We're going to mute all the lines until we get to that Q&A, just to keep the panelists free of background noise. As I mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll also share some information in the chat. We'd love to know a little bit about you in the chat. So share where you're from, why you joined us today. Also, we are a 501c3 organization, so the conversation here is going to be focused, is going to be nonpartisan, along with all the resources shared. And now I want to pass it over to Monica Gray, who's the CEO of YWCA National Capital Area. She will do a quick intro on our panelists, and then we'll start a discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And again, as Sarah said, good evening, and thank you all for joining us. As Sarah shared, we were interested in having a conversation following the conclusion of the election, which thankfully is now over, mostly, kind of, and eventually. So the good news is that, we made it through a completely unusual and extremely turbulent election season. We now have largely settled most of those contests. And all around our country, we're now looking toward newly elected leaders to continue the work of acting in the best interest of everyone in our country, which we hope is what they're going to do. But organizations like the YWCA, which is mission-driven work, also has an eye on very specific issues. As you all probably know, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And so we are looking forward to working with elected officials who are interested in helping us live that mission and doing that difficult work. We were founded over 160 years ago, so this is not our first election, and it's not our first post-election forward look at what we can do to continue the work. Regardless of where your candidates landed, whether or not the folks that you supported were successful in their contest or not, at the end of the day, those of us who do this work have to continue that work and look at working with those in elected office to do so. And also look forward to continuing the work, hopefully in an environment where people are more willing to consider what is important and just for the majority of folks in our country. And we have the pleasure of being joined this evening by our peers in the nonprofit community from 3 organizations who, like us, live in very mission-driven work, working for those most vulnerable in our community. And so I'd like to first introduce Jillian Buford, who's a community organizer that represents Serve Your City and Ward 6 Mutual Aid. So welcome, Jillian. I'd also like to introduce Claire Dempsey, who's a case manager at the NQRP program, which is for detained adults, and also represents CARE, of the Capital Area Immigrants' Right Coalition. So welcome, Claire. And then Amy Javade, who's a senior vice president at A Wider Circle, which is an organization that supports vulnerable families. So welcome to all of you. And if you could each just take a minute to, again, reintroduce yourselves and talk a little bit more about your organization, and in particular, some of your vision for what lies ahead. Why don't we start with Jillian?
Hi, my name is Jillian Burford. She, her pronouns. I volunteer with Serve Your City, and I function as a co-social media coordinator. So anything that you see on Facebook, that's me. What do we have lying ahead for the future? Y'all will see me read from my notebook from time to time and take notes. Serve Your City has a lot of things going on in terms of visiting our unhoused residents in the encampments, mutual aid work, but also extracurricular activities and youth enrichment programs, which Serve Your City has been doing for almost 20 years now under the leadership of Maurice Cook. Let's see, there's also a laptop training program. So you're gonna hear like way more things from me in terms of what Serve Your City is doing, but our hope for the future is to keep this work going and also to inspire more of our community to get involved with all of us.
Thanks. And Claire, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Claire Dempsey. Like you mentioned, I'm a case manager at the Capital Area Immigrants' Rights Coalition. We call it CARE Coalition for short, and we work to provide legal services for detained immigrants. And so our work has, like everyone's, been really impacted by COVID. I think not only because our families have really been hit by COVID in detention centers, but outside with people losing their jobs, getting COVID, not being eligible for federal benefits. In terms of what lies ahead, I think we feel very cautiously optimistic about opportunities to kind of repeal some of these limitations on asylum that have been put in place over the last few years. We look forward to just continuing collaborations with other nonprofits to support our folks both in legal proceedings and expanding our social services. But yeah, I'll speak more to that later.
Thanks so much, Claire. And then Amy?
Good evening, everyone. First, thanks to Sarah and Monica for inviting me. It's an honor to be part of this great panel and discussion. My name is Amy Javed. I'm the Senior Vice President at A Wider Circle. Some of you may already have heard of us. Many of you have probably heard that we're the furniture people. We are that plus more. Our mission is to eradicate poverty through on-the-ground services, including in making a house a home through our furniture program, which has been operating in person since June. And we're currently furnishing about 15 homes a day. Workforce development services, and we've been doing about 35 to 40 virtual workshops since March, and did a month-long intensive workforce development training boot camp. And then our neighborhood revitalization. We have 2 offices in DC, one in Shaw and one in Ward 8 in Washington Highlands, and have been doing a lot of emergency services in those 2 communities, including delivering more than 10,000 hot meals, weekly produce, household good delivery, and we're now gearing up for our holiday program, which will include a minimum of 10,000 gifts to children living in DC public housing. So I'm honored to be here tonight and to be part of the discussion of what is now and what should be as we move ahead.
Thanks, Amy. So our first question for the panel is, as I said, the election is more or less over. And the last 4 years for many has been a struggle. Many governments, both at the state and national level, had changed the way they funded, and it had a significant impact on families, particularly lower income families, and on nonprofit organizations. So can you each talk to us about how your community and the people that you serve have been impacted over the last several years? And you can go in whatever order you're comfortable.
I'm happy to start. We work primarily with low-income, vulnerable individuals, families, and communities. And what we have found in the previous 4 years, unfortunately for those populations, is very little has changed. Opportunities to attain financial self-sufficiency still are seen as unattainable. Things like SNAP, TANF, some of those other federal programs that are really meant to support low-income individuals, the regulations have gotten harder or stricter. The level of rejections for applications or the inability to extend certain things has gotten more complicated. And so the number of people who are living in scarcity and in need has only grown over the past 4 years. And I think COVID has only made that worse. And so as we look behind and look ahead, it is really thinking about not just those who sort of began to suffer in the era of COVID, but those who are struggling before, those who are struggling for the past 4 years and even before that, those who have been entrenched in generational poverty, those who have been the victims of structural and longstanding racism and the practices that have followed from that. And how, as we look ahead, can we bring everybody forward? And so it is both an important in looking backward, but really trying to think ahead and trying to ensure that it is not just sort of supporting the low-hanging fruit, but supporting everybody.
I'm happy to go. I mean, I think it comes to no surprise to anyone who has paid attention to immigration at all in the last 4 years that there's just been a continuous stripping of asylum protections, making it nearly impossible for people to seek asylum. And as Amy mentioned, this is, you know, all relative. It's not like asylum was easy before Trump stepped into office. Obama was famously known as the deporter in chief. So we've really seen difficulty in that sense. The Remain in Mexico program forced families to stay in Mexico as they awaited their court hearings for asylum, leaving people in really dangerous situations. There was a third country rule, basically making it impossible for people to seek asylum if they had traveled through a third country, which for many folks from Central America just completely eliminates the possibility of getting any sort of protection here. And just the continuous ignorance of any sort of international human rights laws. So family separation is a classic example, the Muslim ban. It's just being beat over and over and over and over. So I think in terms of all of the legal challenges, it was just a very difficult 4 years. I think I would echo what Amy said about the families who are not detained, but the families of our clients have just been facing the same struggles of getting access to benefits, finding employment, and that's not something that we've really seen change too much in the last 4 years.
So I'm still relatively new at Serve Your City. I've been in my position for about 3 months now. So I can't necessarily speak to what has been changing throughout, but I have been a part of the Board 5 mutual aid group very early on in the pandemic. And what I've noticed that the pandemic has actually changed a lot of folks' perspectives on where they are in life and understanding that there's no such thing as real security during a global pandemic. So it's moved a lot of people from an individualistic mindset to more of a communal mindset. And we now see more and more people meeting with their neighbors through the DC Mutual Aid Network, where we are connecting folks who are directly across the street from people that they've never talked to, but now they're delivering meals and checking in on each other every single day. So that's my perspective on how things have shifted for Serve Your City. Like, we have a number of volunteers coming in to provide absolutely free services to youth in terms of like the enrichment programs, tutoring, donating laptops and digital devices and things like that. So now we're actually seeing more of a community. From in my opinion, like within my own neighborhood, I see more of a communal space happening. So that's how yeah.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, Julian, I think that's a good point, saying, talking a little bit about COVID. It kind of, or a lot about COVID actually, that leads into kind of our next question. COVID obviously has dramatically changed everybody's daily life. And I'm really wondering what each of your organizations have been doing to support the people that you serve, and how you're helping them during this time. Julian, if you have anything else you want to add there, I'd love to hear it. You can go first.
Okay. So as we all know, we still don't have a vaccine for COVID, but another thing that Serve Your City is doing is that we're making sure that folks are aware that flu shots are still a thing, and that is another way that we can protect each other in our communities. But with the pandemic happening, we've been able to spread our reach more, because it was mainly focused in Ward 6, but we've been able to spread our reach to wards 5, 7, and 8 as well, with food donations, masks, hand sanitizers, going to the encampment sites in various locations. One of the most notable ones is can never remember which street, but it's one of the overpasses near Noma, and then another encampment near Dunbar. So even though the CDC actually has said, don't don't clear the encampments, because the safest place that they can be is outside with resources and social distancing, instead of being cooped into one space. But we've been seeing the opposite throughout the city for the last few months, and that is absolutely a problem. So Serve Your City has actually stepped up and brought more volunteers to provide masks, cleaning supplies, diapers, clothes, important resources on how to keep yourself safe, making sure that the city puts in hand washing stations. And unfortunately, those are already breaking. But we absolutely need to make sure that our city council members know that, because those are tax dollars and these are our residents. Let's see, I might have lost my train of thought a little bit, but we've definitely made sure to take care of each other and get to know each other as this global pandemic goes on, because it's very unpredictable and we don't know where we're going to be in another 9 months.
Thank you so much. Claire?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest focus for us as we work with detained folks is just getting everyone out of detention. That is a primary goal of our organization, is ending detention. But while we have it, we have to continue to work on the system, unfortunately. And the best way to keep our clients safe, unfortunately, is to get them out. Over 96% of the folks detained at one of the largest facilities we work with tested positive for COVID, and numerous clients that we work with have had COVID. Some of them have been hospitalized. One person at the facility we work with died. And so it really, the fear is very much there. There's no accountability at the detention centers or from ICE. So we've just been trying everything we can. I'm not personally a lawyer, but many of my attorney colleagues have just been doing a lot of bond cases. Habeas, there's all sorts of lawsuits going around just trying to get people out. And we've been pretty successful, but we're still going. So that's been the main thing. On the social services end, we are just trying to support the families of folks while their family members are detained. And so making sure they get connected to cash assistance and advocating to make sure that detained immigrants and their families can fit under these programs, because that's always difficult, is making sure that community leaders who are building these programs understand the populations that are often locked out of them. And then in addition, just making sure people's basic needs are met. So we've really run through all of the grocery gift cards, making sure that people have rides places if they're not connected to public transport, and really just basic needs to make sure people are can be safe and have their basic needs met.
Thank you for sharing. That's a lot of work. Appreciate both the legal side of it, but also just the standard basic needs. Amy, how about you all?
So I think, your question about talking about COVID changing all of our lives, I mean, it's changed all of our lives. Everyone who's on this call and meeting, some of us have learned to cook a little bit more. Some of us have cleaned a little bit more. Some of us have figured out the things that we really can't live without and all the things we can live without. And so there's something wonderful in that. But one of the things that we are reminded of is our neighbors who may not have very many possessions in their home. We had one person who we spoke to at the beginning of this, and we had to cancel her furniture appointment. And she said, but all I have are 2 milk crates in my apartment. How am I supposed to live through the pandemic and not leave my house with just that? And so I think that realization has really caused us to pivot and to figure out how can we serve as safely as possible. So obviously putting in all of the appropriate safety measures, but making sure that we have intentional conversations with our clients, especially if we've had to change their appointments for safety purposes, making sure that we seek to address the immediate and urgent needs. So for many of our folks, it was food. Especially the residents in Ward 8, they didn't want to get onto public transportation to get to a grocery store. They don't own a car. They don't live near a grocery store. So it was, how do we get food to folks? And then it was, how do we get information to folks? Because awareness around social distancing, awareness around the importance of wearing a mask, actually getting masks. We were part of a campaign with Sibley Hospital and Johns Hopkins and delivered 3,000 masks within our community. And we were one of about 8 communities across the city that was fortunate to receive masks to be able to distribute to vulnerable communities. But all of us have, our lives have all changed. But for those who are vulnerable, the needs have just grown, the scarcity has grown, and so too has the anxiety, the frustration, all of the issues that go on. We have a large contract with the Child and Family Services Administration, and they were talking about how they can't do safe child visitations. And so they actually drive by and the families have to put the child in the window so the child can wave to show that the child is okay. And so it's those sorts of moments that really pull at your heart and make you sort of want to do this all the more. I had a client who called a few weeks ago and she was laid off in June because of COVID, and her husband got COVID and he passed away. And she called to ask if we had any money to help pay for the funeral or help pay for his burial. So those sorts of moments kind of do take us to the point of, it has dramatically changed all of our lives, but for some of our neighbors, the changes are so much more dramatic than we could even imagine. And what can and what should we be doing to help?
Thank you. Monica, if you want to take the next
Sure.
one.
Thanks so much, Amy. And I also wanted to just add, sort of on behalf of the Y, because I realized that we are also represented here, and I should share that, we had the great fortune early on in the pandemic of having our team be able to quickly shift many of our support services to online. So our adult learning programs, adult education and workforce development programs were shifted online. Our youth mentoring program was shifted online. Our our financial empowerment for survivors of domestic violence shifted online. And that was sort of a really quick and effective way of moving a lot of the direct services, in-person services. But one of the things that we found also very quickly was, while we were able to smoothly move a lot of those things online, we were hit with what all the other 3 organizations have shared, that the folks in our community were those who were first and most dramatically impacted by the quarantine. And so these are, frontline workers who work often for small businesses or for retail organizations, and were the first people to be laid off or furloughed. And in many cases with not great benefits, in some cases with few benefits. Many of the folks in our surrounding community, people who live in this neighborhood, work in the hotel, hospitality, and entertainment industries. So again, the first people to be laid off, and often, sometimes because of immigration status, sometimes because of just how long they've been in the workplace, not really qualifying for some of the benefits that others receive. And so we quickly realized that we had to do some pivoting of our own. And so we had been running a very small food pantry to support our primarily our adult learners. And we quickly expanded that to provide greater food support, because we found many of our students found themselves unemployed and without any extra resources. The other thing we found, and a lot of people heard about the PPP loans that were offered to many different types of organizations. But what many people don't realize is that many small organizations, many small businesses, particularly those run by Black and brown people, didn't qualify, because in order to get a PPP loan, you had to have a banking relationship with a large bank, because those were the ones that were vetted by the federal government and approved to give those loans. So if you did not previously have that, and you have a family business that you've been running for 5, 10, 15 years, but you're banking with a small community bank versus a larger bank, then you didn't qualify for those loans. So some of the protections that were built in that people kept hearing about, and they kept thinking like, that's so great, that's helping a lot of people, actually weren't helping the most vulnerable people. And many of the most vulnerable people also didn't receive the checks that the federal government issued for a variety of reasons. Either they didn't pay taxes, they weren't on certain rolls. And so the reality is that the people who most needed the help the most urgently were the folks who were left out of a lot of the programs. And I just want to also sort of add to what Amy said about thinking about how the pandemic has impacted different communities differently. I half jokingly, but quite seriously often say to people that, my trigger word is we're all at home. Whenever I hear people say that phrase, I find that so offensive because I have to remind folks, and I hope we all remind folks, that the only reason that some people have the luxury and privilege of being home is because other people aren't. We don't have to go to the grocery store because someone goes for us. We're not out in our backyard foraging for our food because someone is farming. And so when we remind everybody about how we're doing such a great job of social distancing, and goodness knows, please do more of that, we have to be mindful that the people who have the least health benefits, if any, the folks who have the least security in their finances, if any, are the same folks who are out there making sure that the rest of us can be safe. And so if this pandemic has not elevated anything else, it is that. And so one of the things that, I ask people to always remind people is that whenever you hear someone say, we're all at home, remind people that we're not, and remind them of who's not home so that the rest of us can safely shelter in. And so I just really wanted to add that and to sort of support all the other organizations and what they've shared. So to that, I wanted to ask our peer organization, where your organization and your community is struggling the most right now. And you can, again, in any order.
I'm happy to start. I think this is a really good question because I think, all of us could easily say, well, we're struggling with the time, talent, and treasure to fully meet the needs, right? I think that's sort of the easiest answer. But in reality, I think what I think is more important to think about are the people that we are serving, those communities, what are they struggling with and how can we best meet their needs as opposed to our needs in terms of an organization. And while there are certain needs that I feel like we and many peer organizations are meeting, some of the things that I think we're not effectively meeting right now that we hear within the organization, within the community, is education and how the education gap with virtual learning is only making things worse. Access to technology, digital literacy, internet access, and how suddenly having 4 devices at home causes all kinds of challenges to your bandwidth and the like. So kind of the education and the technology. I think the other piece is as the weather is changing, some of the mental health challenges that come along with that, kind of the anxiety, the depression, the isolation, some of the chronic conditions that when you could be out with the vitamin D and taking the walk around the block felt a little better. And now that you're supposed to be home and a bit more sedentary, don't feel so good. And I think the last one is as it gets colder, you have to pay more heating bills. You still have to pay the rent. It gets colder and harder to go get the food. And you may need more medicine. And so you're suddenly making those difficult choices of, do I get further behind in the rent knowing that right now I can't get evicted, but suddenly that bill's gonna come due and it's gonna be huge? Or do I skip the medicine this month because I don't wanna go to the pharmacy and put myself at risk? Do I feed my children? And kind of how do I balance all of that? And so I think for us, kind of those are the core struggles that we're hearing in our community. And while we have a comprehensive approach, we can't do it all alone. And it is finding and identifying core partners to work with us and with those community members to identify the needs and figure out the best way to meet them.
Thanks, Amy. Claire or Jillian?
So our organization, we actually have a lot of the exact same struggles as Amy's organization, but more on a youth level. But in terms of food distribution, we can always use more food. But the thing with us that we struggle with the most is that we want to do so many things. But the thing is, we shouldn't have to be doing these things because we have elected officials who should be doing these things as a whole, especially in terms of the digital divide. That was a major issue very early on in the pandemic and still now. That's still a very big concern right now because a lot of the devices that were provided through DCPS and the DC charter schools, a lot of those devices are breaking now, or children are being fatigued by being behind a computer desk all day, because I know I am. I'm very tired after a very long day of sitting at a computer. So the expectation that children can do this too, all day, every single day, starting from maybe 7:45 in the morning, that's a huge issue. So we're trying to build up more extracurricular activities. And also we've definitely moved everything more to a virtual platform, but also when we do have in-person things, we make sure that the kids know that they need to be distanced, even if they are outside. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you can hear my papers rust. Should not be our responsibility. Oops, sorry, my internet's a little shaky today. I don't know if you can still hear me. So another thing that we're definitely doing, we're holding our elected officials accountable. So just today, our executive director went to the DNC to talk about the Green New Deal, and he will be sleeping outside today and tomorrow to make sure we get that done. Because even though we do have these new folks that are going to be in the position to hold all this power in 2021, there's still work to do, and we're going to make sure that we keep that work going, because it shouldn't just take community power to take care of the community.
Thanks, Jillian. Claire?
Yeah, I think similar to what Amy and Jillian said, and I've kind of alluded to this before, but in terms of what our clients and their families are struggling with, it's the same things of almost all of our clients have had COVID because they were detained. I think that's a struggle in itself to be detained. If you add COVID on top of that, I can't really imagine being in that position. The families we're working with, many of them have also had COVID, have lost work. When our clients are getting released, there's just no work. And so that's a very difficult obstacle to add on top of just recently getting out of ICE detention. I think in terms of what we've been struggling with as an organization is some of these obstacles of all of the asylum regulations, just constantly changing day to day. We've seen that the Trump administration really has been working hard to limit these opportunities just in the very last days of his administration. But also the ICE raids and just situations in the courts. So the courts are a little bit of a mess. And so that has actually kind of switched up how we can prepare for cases, because we don't know who the judge is going to be. And so we have all of these new judges and things are constantly changing. There's been a lot of administrative issues, which just makes things even more unpredictable. And then I think we're all just feeling a little bit burnt out. And I think in the beginning of the pandemic, we had more support from the community. I think people were really empathetic, and we still appreciate the folks who are helping us out, but I think everyone's feeling burnt out and we get it. And so I think there's less of a focus on community engagement now than there was in the beginning of the pandemic.
Thanks, everyone. And I'll just share for us, I think, similar to what has been shared, we have our learners and our youth, sort of having a technology fatigue. And as is not uncommon, we, have folks who are struggling. The online learning environment is not necessarily the best learning environment for many of the adult learners with whom we work. Many have risen to the occasion, but it still is a struggle, and like everyone else, balancing, educating children at home. So in some cases working at home and then educating themselves at home. Food insecurity is increasing. So, we're still facing an urgent situation, providing food support for individuals, and then mental health challenges. So our youth programs manager, Erica Doe, is with us this evening, and I were just talking about that yesterday and again today, about the urgency with which all people, but in particular our young people, our teenagers in particular, are needing mental health support, and the limited resources that are available for them. And the fact that they're now, young people are reaching out to the people they know and trust. You know, in our case, we're fortunate because we have a licensed social worker who's mental health training. But in some organizations, it's the staff. And so everyone on here who works for a nonprofit knows that sometimes, you know, you're put in a position where you're providing that support without that training. And so we're seeing that fatigue that we're all experiencing, but it's particularly impacting those who are more vulnerable and who are living with a lot more insecurity, whether it's housing insecurity or food insecurity. And so we're also struggling with that. And then I also see what Claire is seeing, where we're seeing less of a sense of we're all in this together and more of a sense of let me get mine. And it's creating challenges. It's creating challenges in terms of people's willingness to donate time and money and resources, but also just the grace of patience and supporting one another. You know, our frontline workers are still the most vulnerable at-risk people. The rate of COVID infection among grocery store workers and you know, other folks who are out there and deal most frequently with the public is dramatically increasing. But what's not increasing is people's protection of them. So people are getting lazier and less thoughtful in their masking and their social distancing and the way they move around people who are most frequently dealing with the public. And so, you know, we're now seeing more cases of COVID in the community again, and a lot of people who are struggling with the results of that, including families, you know, where you have many people in the community, again, who live right in our neighborhood. We're dealing with folks who had pre-pandemic had 2 or 3 jobs just to stay afloat. And you can imagine what that means in terms of someone's vulnerability where their health is concerned, as well as where their finances are concerned. And so, you know, like all other organizations, we're looking for, you know, a renewed spirit of community. And we hope that some of our new elected leaders will bring that to us. But in the meantime, we're also looking for community members to bring that. And we're hopeful that in the season of Thanksgiving, that folks are mindful that, you know, a lot of us can be thankful that we made it through a really difficult year because a lot of people put themselves on the line to keep us safe. So, Sarah, I think you're up with the next question.
Yeah, this actually leads into the next question perfectly. I'd love for each of you to share a couple or 1 or 2 ways that the community can support you, whether that's money or time or volunteering or advocacy, whatever your pitch is right now. We'd love to hear it. Jillian, if you want to go first.
So we're definitely always looking for volunteers and donations. If you're interested in getting involved with Ward 6 Mutual Aid, Silver City is actually not doing the Ward 6 Mutual Aid alone. We are one of the lead partners, working with about 3 dozen other organizations, but they can be reached through ward6mutualaid@gmail.com. Or if you need support, you can reach this email as well. We have a hotline. It is 202-683-9962. We are still offering tutoring. So if you're interested in tutoring some DC youth, any age, any subject, there's SYC tutoring mutualaid@gmail.com. Our website is serveyourcitydc.org. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. You can donate directly to the organization, check out all of the numerous programs that we have going on. If you want to donate any cleaning supplies, food, we're definitely open to whatever you're willing to give up. Not give up because that sounds indefinite and final, but whatever you're willing to offer, because this is still a community effort. So whatever you're willing to give, we are willing to take and disperse to the community.
Jillian, thank you so much. If you could do us a favor and drop that email and those 2 emails that you shared and the phone number in the chat so folks can have them, that would be really helpful. I already shared Serve Your City's website for folks. Someone had already asked for your information, so excited. Claire, how about Care Coalition?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm very grateful for is that we've been lucky enough to have lots of volunteers. So I think we're okay on that front, which is really awesome. I think spreading the word is always helpful. I think a lot of people think that just because we have a new administration means that immigration is going to be fixed, when in reality, we all know that's not the truth. And then we always are looking for help. You know, if you do feel the urge to contribute, the donation link is on our website. We're trying to get people home for the holidays, so that will really help in supporting bond cases, making sure people are supported in that way. And then also just making sure that our social services program is supported as well, and that people can put food on their table this holiday season.
Thank you. Amy?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. I think for us, I would say there's two sort of buckets of ways to help. One is always financial donations are always welcome. They allow us to put it where it is of greatest need. And right now that is in a mix of realms, whether that is ensuring that we have some of our household products to deliver in the neighborhood, or if it's ensuring that our staff have the PPE necessary to keep our doors open. So financial donations are, of course, welcome. In the end of the year for many nonprofits is a big time of giving. And so we're always looking for and grateful for any donations in that realm. But I think the second part is our holiday program. We do about 350 Thanksgiving meals through non-perishables and gift cards that will be delivered over the course of Tuesday and Wednesday next week, both in the Shaw neighborhood as well as in Ward 8. And then we have a partnership with the DC Housing Authority to do 10,000 toys. We have an Amazon wish list that people can purchase those toys and have them delivered directly to us so that they don't have to even leave their homes for that. We also have a family sponsorship program where you can sponsor a family and again get a link to be able to send toys that can then be delivered. You can deliver them yourself if you feel safe doing so, but we can also deliver them for you. And then we are doing kind of gift baskets for some of the families that come to us for furniture. As some of you may know, the one cost that our families who come to us need to incur is the transportation to pick up all of their new furniture. And as a result, many of them will not have the disposable income to make the holidays in any way special. And it will be an unusual set of holidays, so that all of the little things that we can do to help them have a sense of joy and hope and togetherness are things that we're prioritizing this season. So holiday program, all of the details are on our website, as well as Claire mentioned, kind of an easy way to donate if you choose to do so financially as well.
Thank you. Amy, Monica, do you have any specific asks for this group?
So I'd say, as with other organizations, certainly monetary support is very helpful. Food donations of non-perishable food items for our food pantry is helpful. And I would also say educational support. So sharing the information that you're learning this evening to help educate the public about where the needs still are in the community and how we can continue to support each other. Again, you know, it's just important that people not forget that while many folks are grateful as we move toward Thanksgiving, that we have, you know, we can celebrate that we got through most so far of this challenging year. But let's not forget the people who've experienced the greatest impacts, and, you know, be mindful of them. So educating folks in our community about the needs that are still there. And then, you know, sharing any resources you have. I mean, one of the great things about the nonprofit community is we work together very effectively, and which is why we're sharing this platform to help educate the public about the shared needs, but also educating people about certainly what Claire said about the fact that even if you feel like candidates have been elected that more closely align with your organization's vision and mission, problems don't get solved because of people's theoretical perspectives. They get solved because people continue to do the work. So immigration isn't getting fixed because there are people of goodwill who would like to see a better situation for our immigrant community. Similarly, our sisters and brothers who are unhoused aren't going to instantly have homes because people believe in investing more in affordable housing. So that work still has to get done. And we have to be mindful that every elected official, regardless of whether they are at the DC City Council, state legislators of Maryland, Virginia, or in the White House, are inheriting a financial and public health crisis. And so when those difficult decisions have to be made, all the philosophies around and theories around what people value, you know, budgets are ethical documents, right? They're moral documents. And they talk about what your values are. And when you're in a crisis situation, a lot of things that you may value and say that you articulate that you value then get pushed to the bottom of that moral document. So it's important that those of us who are doing the work stay on top of the issues, and when the discussion of trade-offs that have to be made take place, really make sure that those conversations are fair and reflective of what's in the best interest of the community at large, and not just the people with the loudest voices who protest the most violently. And speaking of transitions in administration, so in the first 100 days of the new leaders who will be sworn in during the month of January, at the president or other elected officials, what do you want new leaders to do or to help your organization and your community?
Oh,
I can,
go first.
I can start. Sorry. Go ahead, Julia.
Oh no, you can go ahead if you want to. No worries.
I was just going to say, I'm going to echo what Monica has already started, that new leaders need to be willing to take a tough look, ask the tough questions, be able to face the tough issues. There needs to be a sense of justice and urgency, and both of those lenses need to be brought to bear as they look at whether it's issues of hunger or housing or employment or transportation. I mean, the list of issues can go on and on. But I think how we look at those issues and the lenses that we use to look at those issues are almost as important as those issues. You know, we need to look at them through the lens of race, through equity, through access, through opportunity. And so I really hope that as we enter these first 100 days and as we talk to and have the opportunity to share voices, especially voices of the most vulnerable with the new leaders, that those lenses can be heard and absorbed and applied as we move forward in decision making.
So what we're expecting and hoping for is that we're actually going to get things that these elected officials are promising. We are absolutely looking forward to a close to the digital divide. I think there was an article that had stated that DC had one of the largest gaps. So even on a presidential level down to the local level, we want to make sure that these devices are put in the hands of the people that need them, because our elected officials remember that promise, that they're going to make sure that we close that educational gap, that we feed the people that we need, to keep this community going. I had it more planned out in my head, but of course, like, we are holding elected officials accountable. That is what we're always going to do, and actually uplift and share Black and Brown led organizations. I did not mention this earlier, it completely slipped my mind, but Serve Your City and Ward 6 Mutual Aid is primarily led by Black and Brown organizations across Ward 6. So we want to make sure that that attention is noted and that these folks are respected and uplifted, because these are the folks that are doing the work.
I can go. I think I just dropped a link to CARE Coalition's demands for the new administration. So I think this ties in well. But I think the three main priorities are to, one, end detention, like we mentioned. I personally would like to call myself an abolitionist, or an abolitionist in training. I don't know as much as I should, but I think we are fighting in a system we don't agree with. And so that is the overarching goal, is to end this system that's just incredibly dehumanizing and dangerous for the people we work with. The second one is to expand asylum protection. So as it stands right now, the people who are most protected under asylum laws are not the ones that the international human rights laws were designed to protect. And so it's very, very difficult. And the last one is just minimize the barriers for people with criminal histories to access asylum. So probably 99% of folks we work with do have some sort of criminal history, and that's how they end up in detention. But we find that people end up in detention and threatened with deportation, sometimes for very serious crimes, other times for driving without a license or a DUI. And none of that, we believe, leads someone to deserve to be deported. And so really just maximizing opportunities for people with criminal histories, because we know those are the ones who are most vulnerable.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up here shortly. I know we have at least one question for the Q&A, but have two more quick questions. Obviously, what our community, just in general, is going to need to do some much needed long-term work for healing, and I'm wondering what you guys are doing in that realm at the moment. Amy, you can go.
Sure. I think when I think of the word healing, I'm reminded of a phrase that a friend of mine says, that, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I think as we talk about the healing process, one of the best things that we can do is listen, and not listen to respond, but listen to learn. I think that the communities that are struggling have the best experience, the best expertise, and the best know-how of what their communities need and how they would like to receive support. I think it is a huge error when we make assumptions of what communities should or can be doing, and that the best thing we can do is to be a support, to be a good listener, and to help, but not to force, not to lead, not to dictate. And so I think as we talk about healing, it is as much about listening and learning, and making space available for voices that up until this point might not have been heard, to be heard in a new and a very intentional way. And so I think as we talk about things, for example, in our Ward 8 community, one of the things we established in COVID was a much more active community advisory council. They are helping delineate our service menu. They're helping us define not only what types of partners we should have, but what partners have they had experience within the community that has been positive and culturally contextualized, so that we're not just hearing, oh, they would like a mental health provider, and us just picking one from a hat, but really listening to the experiences of those we are working with to help vet partners. So I think it's all of those and many more things that we can and should be doing. But I think just starting with listening is a really good place to begin.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, I think so. I would say that we're doing the work internally as we are externally. So this year has been very difficult for us, as it has for everyone. And I think we're trying to learn to take care of each other. So we've just had like a renewed sense of purpose for self-care. We recently had kind of like a grief session, learning about grief and coping strategies following the election, both in response to the election as well as COVID generally, and addressing burnout. So we brought in folks from the Went Center to meet with the staff and kind of process together. We also had launched a committee, an equity and inclusion committee, in January of this year, and in June really saw an increased need for that committee to address concerns particularly around race in the workplace, and kind of intertwining how that affects the way we work with clients as well. So we're kind of looking at our internal procedures and how to make it an inclusive space, and one that really structurally understands how to uplift people of color, both their voices, and to address structural inequities of power in the workplace. I would say externally, kind of like Amy alluded to, building community. So I think we found it's really important to partner with other organizations. We recently partnered with UndocuBlack, which is an organization that works with Black immigrants, both advocacy and direct service, and as kind of like a way to inform the community about how immigration is really a racial justice issue. And we're also trying to build community through doing a watch series. So there's a series called Immigration Nation on Netflix right now, and we're leading watch groups. So we have a discussion series after, and staff members talk with community members about what they've been seeing and how they see that play out in their own communities. And just kind of like Amy also mentioned, I think you stated it really well, just continuing to try to listen to our community and the members that we serve, and ask them what it is that they need, because they know best at the end of the day.
Thank you. Jillian.
In terms of Service City, in terms like with the healing work that we're doing, Service City is still following the nearly 20 years of youth enrichment that the organization is dedicated to. So lots of programs such as guitar, creative writing, yoga and meditation every single Sunday, photography, piano, computer coding, horseback riding, and a trapeze school now. So Service City is just adding more and more things every week. With our volunteers and our community members, we are making sure that we uplift and spotlight folks during our new newsletter that we're going to be rolling out every week, hopefully. But we are introducing more of our community because we are all about affirmations. I've never gotten so many affirmations in my life in the last 3 months than I have been in the Service City spaces, because we're making sure that we understand that everything's unpredictable. You have to uplift folks where they can be so they can get more involved and then bring more folks in. So we're constantly working with different organizations. For example, like the Capitol Hill Arts Workshop, Indivisible Arts Collective, Black Girls Code, Circle Yoga, Trapeze School, and Sprout Therapeutic Writing and Education Center. We're always looking for new things to do. We ask the kids what they want. We also provide books. That was my introduction. I'm sorry, it's been a day, so I'm kind of losing it in terms of like my ability to talk properly. But my introduction to Service City has actually been through Maurice Cook showing up and providing a school that I worked for with a bunch of brand new books by pulling in donors for me. So that is the work that Service City is continuing to do. We make sure that we provide books to Black and Brown students where they can see themselves as a protagonist, and then also uplift our history and cultures. So that is what we're doing in terms of healing. We are definitely trying to enrich the mind and different knowledgeable skills and abilities and things like that.
Thank you, Jillian. Never apologize for working too hard and being tired. I think, especially right now, we have to give, as we said earlier in this call, give each of us some grace. So, Monica, I'll let you end, and then we have at least one question for Q&A.
Sure. So our last question is just for you all to share any stories of resilience and success.
Well, my story of resilience and success actually comes from my time before Service City, before I officially joined. So in terms of that little tidbit that I added about the books, with resilience, I worked at a school in Ward 7 that did not have a library at all. The children had no idea that this space existed. And I had actually met the executive director at a completely different thing for organizers, and he gave me his card one day and said, "Get like anything that you need, I can get it for you." Didn't believe him in all honesty. And then I happened to find that card maybe a month or two later, and I reached out and he said, "Okay, I'm on it." And I was like, okay. Didn't hear from him for maybe 2 months. Then one day got a phone call, and he had told me that he found a bunch of donors to provide books from an Amazon wish list that I allowed my students to build themselves. So I worked as a librarian at a school that was actually 99.9% Black. That was the statistic that the school gave me. So the goal was to actually provide these kids with books where they can see themselves. And because of this donation and because of the work, making sure that these kids can see themselves represented in the pages, their reading scores actually went up by several grade levels because they were able to read what they wanted. So Serbia City provided graphic novels, history books. I had some of these kids reading Shakespeare by their own choice. But because of Serve Your City, I was actually able to reach my personal goal of filling that library space because of donors wanting to make sure that we can educate the youth and uplift them and continue to get. Sorry, I'm like really just like full of emotion right now because of this work, but it has been 4 years that I have been acquainted with Serve Your City, and this is what I've been able to do. And I was brought back into the community because Serve Your City does things like that.
Thanks, Julian.
I can add a kind of a story or two. I think one of the things that we've all realized is sort of what's most important to us during this time. And we've pulled together in a variety of different definitions. We've had people who have waited months for a furniture appointment only to find themselves either ill or with an underlying health condition and potentially running the risk of not being able to get the furniture that they've wanted for so long, a bed to sleep in or a sofa to sit on. And to see their family members or their faith community members or people who have never met them before offer to help drive a truck to our facility, pick up furniture for them, take it to their home. I think that's just a sign of community coming together. We've had clients who, after receiving a service, whether it's in virtual or in person, within 24 hours, send us a check for $10. I mean, that $10 from that person might mean more than $100,000 from somebody else because we know all of the struggles that they have been through in life. We've had offers of some of those very clients saying, I want to come tomorrow and help volunteer. And so I think that that sense of resilience and community building and hope is something that all of us should not only hold on to for a sense of inspiration, given that we're all burned out, but also try and emulate and share with others. Because I think for as long as COVID has gone on and as long as it will continue to go on, it's going to be that sense of togetherness. And at the same time, that sense of recognition that while we're all in it together, we're not all in it equally together. And therefore, we really need to be thinking about each other in different and distinct and unique ways that are very supportive and, to Jillian's point, very uplifting to allow all of us to kind of make it through together and hopefully better at the other end.
I think, not to be corny, but I think every day I'll find the resilience in our clients, right? Like they're detained to me that they've, traveled from other countries, have endured lots of obstacles along the way, have been detained. And those are always just signs of resilience in our clients. I had a client the other day who was schizophrenic and he was detained for like 2.5 years. And after 2 days, the same day he was released from detention, had taken an overnight bus and it was already working the day he was released. And to me, I'm like, it would take me months to find a job. And I'm someone who has a college degree. Like, how does one do this? And so to me, it's like the small moments like that. I think that there's one specific example of someone, I'll call him Guillermo, who had COVID and he was detained, and it's kind of the height of the COVID outbreak. And he was preparing for his trial with his attorney every day, literally coughing on the phone. He had 2 young kids at home, and his attorney was like not sure if he was going to be hospitalized. But ultimately, they made it through trial. He won his case. He's now out. He's doing well. He's with his kids. And it's just that kind of like spirit of resilience that we see all of the time that really blows me away. I also popped a little link to a story, a pretty cute coming home video that for one of our clients filming his reunion with his family. So it's all these stories of family reunions after a lot of resilience that kind of keep us going.
Thank you all. And we have a couple members of our team on the line, and I just wanted to give a moment for any member of the YWCA and CA team who wants to share a story of resilience. I can, but I don't want to be the third person storyteller. So if any member of the YWCA team would like to.
Sure. I'll say we saw resilience early on with our young people this summer. We are used to having an in-person, super interactive, running all over, having fun 6-week summer program. And this summer it was 9 weeks online every day. And we had kids show up every day online, 9 weeks from whatever time we started, 10 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. And they stayed with us throughout. They showed up whether they were anxious, they showed up whether they were feeling really low and depressed. They came with all of their emotions and all of their things. And they showed up because they knew they could find a safe emotional space at our YWCA summer program. And they shared with one another and they uplifted each other every single day. Girls who last year you could barely get to speak. They came and it didn't matter how they were feeling. They were uplifting their sisters because they understood that even if they didn't understand fully what was happening, they understood fully that they were experiencing a negative feeling emotion, and they understood that their sisters were as well. But instead of allowing it to keep them locked down and depressed and in their homes by themselves, they came on every day so that they could share and be an uplifter, and that they too could be uplifted. And so, I mean, those girls, they stayed with us the entire time, and they still continue with us, even though we're not running our program on a weekly basis. They're still coming to Saturdays. They're still reaching out. They're still asking for help that they need, and they're still providing support to one another.
Thanks, Erica. Okay. So before we close, I just want to thank everyone.
Could I one thing?
Yeah.
Just, you know, I'm so inspired by everybody I've heard here tonight, and I see resilience in all of you. I mean, this is an incredible period we've been in and continue to be in, and you're working your hearts out for people who are so needy and having such a positive influence. So I, for one, I salute you. I'm really tremendously impressed and so happy that I could join tonight and hear these stories.
Thanks, Teresa. And just want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for uplifting the issues and the work that we continue to do, and reminding folks that while, you know, I think as a feminist organization, as a racial justice, racial equity and gender justice and gender equity organization, we celebrate some of the victories we've seen. We celebrate having the first woman as a member of the White House administration and the first woman of color. We celebrate a record number of women in Congress and in many of the state and local government agencies. State and local legislatures. So we celebrate all those victories, but we are also mindful, as everyone has stated, that the work still has to be done. So even if we feel like we have some allies in different elected offices, the reality is that the work gets done at the community level, and we still have to continue to get that work done and to raise those issues. I think we were all reminded that a crisis that was brought to our attention not quite 2 years ago with family separations is not a resolved crisis, that children who were separated from their parents, in some cases 3 years ago, are still separated from their parents. and we still have to hold elected officials responsible for reuniting those families. We are reminded that women are still most adversely impacted by any financial crisis. And we are now at a place where we have the lowest number of women in the workforce that we have had since World War II. And that is because many women have had to officially step out of the workforce during the pandemic, and also because we are the frontline workers who are the first to be laid off. And so we have to be mindful that we continue to raise those issues. And so there's a lot of work to be done, a lot to celebrate, but certainly a lot of work to be done. And we are grateful for our peer organizations who joined us tonight and the great work that they continue to do. I remind everyone on our team when we have those moments where we're feeling a little depleted and a little bit frustrated and a little bit overwhelmed, that when this organization was founded more than 160 years ago, most African Americans lived in chattel slavery, and women didn't have the right to vote, own property, or have almost any of the rights that we believed that the Constitution promises everyone. And yet, here's where we are. And so we have to be reminded that, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done, but the creative force that is women and the creative energy that comes from our communities of color, our immigrant community, has overcome a great many challenges, and that's work we can continue to unite together to get done. But again, as I asked earlier, that we continue to educate one another, and I think Amy said it best when she said, you know, reminded us that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so as we move forward, we have to be willing and able to listen, to hear people's concerns, and then respect the work that our community leaders in our different issue areas are doing, and continue to elevate those issues to the people in our circle. So we thank everybody for joining us this evening. We hope that everybody has a very safe and healthy and happy Thanksgiving, even if it looks different than it has in the past. You know, Dr. Fauci said it best. If you want to get together with the people you loved in 2021, stay apart from them in 2020. So let's honor our public health professionals' best advice, and then let's look forward to a 2021 that is better for all of us than 2020 has been for many. So thank you all for joining us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick closing. I wanted to echo Monica and saying thank you for coming today. And also, I know we mentioned this several times, but it's worth noting, this is the season of giving. So please do consider giving to these organizations and the work that they do on the ground. Obviously, you can visit any of their websites for information. I will send a follow-up email with their information as well. For us here at the YWCA National Capital Area, you can go to ywcanca.org/donate now, or give us a ring directly at our office, which is 202-626-0700. So we appreciate all of you. Hope to see you next year as we continue these courageous conversations. So have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah.